Meanwhile, earlier this week, 25 Senate Republicans reversed course and decided to vote against a bill meant to help with veterans' health care. Millions of veterans are struggling to survive painful and gruesome symptoms of toxic exposure to burn pits during their time on duty. The Senate passed a bill to help these sick veterans, but more than 24 Republicans decided to block the measure after originally agreeing to support it. So why would they do this? Some are speculating the GOP is retaliating against Senator Joe Manchin after he struck a deal with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer on climate and taxes. Well, last night I spoke to Niall Stanage about this pressing issue. Here's part of that conversation. Niall Stanage, associate editor at The Hill, joining us now. And Niall, isn't this just a bad look for the GOP? I mean, it feels petty, and meanwhile, veterans are the ones suffering here.
There's no question that it's a bad look, and it's a bad look for several reasons. One is simply the substance of this bill, and I'm glad you pointed out in your introduction, Tasha, that this involves millions of veterans. Sometimes I think people look at these small groups of protesters and think maybe we're talking about a couple of hundred, couple of thousand veterans. This affects about 3 million veterans. The other way in which it's a bad look is in relation to the Republican explanation for opposing it, which has to do with a very labyrinthine issue about spending and how spending is classified. And there's an old saying in politics that if you're explaining, you're losing. And I think that applies here, because the clear message of this bill is it's a bill to help veterans get health care to which they're entitled, and to then get into the minutiae of federal spending and what is classified under which heading is just no good, politically speaking.
I mean, Niall, if this was retaliation, couldn't the GOP find another way to express their displeasure at the Manchin-Schumer deal?
Quite possibly. I mean, the Manchin-Schumer deal did somewhat come out of nowhere. That idea or that proposal had been thought to be dead in the water after Senator Manchin had appeared to walk away. Having walked away, he walked back again, to everyone's surprise. Now, I'm sure there are other ways that the Republican Party could register its opposition. It's worth pointing out that Republicans don't accept or don't acknowledge that they are doing this in response to the Manchin-Schumer deal. They lean on the explanation about spending that I mentioned earlier on.
And we actually have the 25 Republicans who voted against the PACT Act. We can bring that up on screen so you can see them. Do you expect the GOP will get more backlash from voters for neglecting veterans?
It certainly could do. I mean, this is very bad for the GOP. It's a very bad story for the GOP. Now, it's worth noting that this bill is not absolutely gone. It could resurface, reemerge, and it could be passed. Initially, there was a whole other debate about certain amendments to it and all sorts of Congress-ese about exactly what might happen. But I suspect it's more likely that Republicans will eventually get on board with this rather than maintain this sort of stout opposition, which I think does cost them politically.
How long do you think that might take?
Well, I mean, the Senate is obviously in session for another week. The House is now on recess, but will be coming back in the second week of August. Midterms are looming in November. You definitely, if you were the GOP, wouldn't want this issue looming over you with a week or two left before the midterm elections. So sooner rather than later in that sense. So
do you believe that this act was just a political casualty, Niall? And if we can't agree on helping veterans, what can we agree on?
The second part of that's a great question. I mean, clearly we're in extraordinarily polarized times. We're in times where very often one party sees a victory from the other party as automatically a defeat for itself, or if the other party is for it, we have to be against it. That's a problem. It's particularly a problem when it does percolate through to things like veteran affairs, which have traditionally been this oasis of bipartisan support in the middle of a desert of polarization.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.